you say in the Quran, this is, unless there's something specific in the verse to imply otherwise, that it's specifically just for Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that this is for all humanity until Judgment Day, and particularly the believers that have believed in this Quran. This is a guidance for them, as Allah mentions many times in the Quran, it's a guidance for humankind. And this is very important to highlight our perspective on time. Yes, the context changes and the places and the names change, but the general nature of humans and the way they behave in their social interaction is the same till Judgment Day. The general ideas, the general nature, the general patterns. That's why Allah Azza wa Jalla has given us this book as guidance from the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ until Judgment Day. So, we need to be listening. When we hear the word qul, that Allah Azza wa Jalla, He's speaking to me right now. He's speaking to every one of us, saying qul. Similarly, when Allah says, for example, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, like we said in Khutbah al-Hajjah, O you who believe. This is a khitab, directly addressed to the believer. Speech directly addressed to the listener. So, Allah says, say, the roughly translated meaning, say, I exhort you only to one thing, that you rise up for Allah's pleasure. And we highlight the issue of ikhlas here. The person rose up for Allah's pleasure. Allah mentions the intention here first. And then Allah says in pairs and even singly, even individually, alone. Then ponder. Then came, you see the thumma. There's a tartib. There's a chronological order here. Thumma tatafakkaru. That Allah says, then what are you doing? There's action involved here. After you've gotten up, you've risen, then reflect or ponder. And then what is going to be the natural consequence if this person ponders, if this person reflects? If this person stood up with the sincerity, with the ikhlas, and at the same time, after they've gotten up, they're pondering. Now, if this is a believer, obviously, we mentioned that there's two types of knowledge that they might be using to do this reflection or pondering. Their knowledge of the worldly context, the world that they live in, the worldly knowledge as we mentioned, and also their Sharia knowledge, their knowledge of Islam. Because they won't know what to do in this world without Islam. That's their guidance. So this person is reflecting. What is going to be the natural conclusion they're going to come to after they do this reflecting and pondering? And we mentioned that this is also one of the proofs for that there's no contradiction between the aql, between fikr or thinking or reflection or reason in Islam and the Islamic text, of course. And if anybody individually would ever to think that in their own mind, then there might be some confusion that they have. Maybe they're preferring their own local custom or tradition or whatever they're used to over the revelation in a particular context. But if this person were to stand up sincerely, seeking Allah's pleasure, and then they're reflecting, then what the natural conclusion they're going to come to is that there is no insanity in your companion, meaning Muhammad our Prophet Muhammad. This is the natural conclusion that they would come to. There's nothing insane or impractical or unideal or impractical or outlandish about what Prophet Muhammad came with. A very practical way of life. And this is why you see many people, when they see the message, and this is many times you see this historically in many contexts, that people when they don't like the message, or it doesn't follow what they want to do, their own lusts and desires, then they want to attack the messenger, or they attack the speaker, or the one relating the message. And this is something very important to also realize. And Allah mentions many times in the Quran that many of the people that were rejecting Prophet Muhammad not necessarily because of him as an individual or anything like that, even though sometimes they claim that, but particularly because they didn't like the message that he was bringing across. It didn't suit their interests, or they're in some whatever position or status. It doesn't suit their personal interest or situation of what they want to do. So this is something also very important to remember. And Allah finishes the ayah saying, what roughly translated means, He is only a warner to you before a severe chastisement. Concluding the ayah. So, this was the verse that we talked a lot about last time. And one of the two main takeaways that we want to remind people of before moving on to continuing the topic is that I mentioned that this ayah could refute at least, for example, two types of people. One type of person, for example, that would think that the reason or Islam being against reason, or that the revelation would contradict reason or logic or anything of that nature, using one's intellect, because of the experience that Christians had in Western Europe in the Middle Ages, 18th, 19th century, in the Western Enlightenment and all of this, this is a conclusion that many people came to, that they made a lump sum generalization that because they had that particular experience, then they viewed that their religion contradicted science and logic or whatever, then they made this a general statement that all religion therefore is supposed to contradict science and logic and be against these things. And of course we know that in the case of Islam this is not the case. And so this being the first type of people that this would refute, that there would be a contradiction between the two. And also, another thing that this would refute also as well is even amongst many of the Muslims you find this same mentality, that there's kind of an apologetic mentality that unfortunately we read a lot of us into the material that's published from academia that might be from a secular humanist lens, as I mentioned, and we get kind of an inferiority complex. So we just repeat many of the same things that we hear, that Islam is calling to some utopian way of life, that there's no crime and it's this mythical world that's unrealistic. Of course this is not the case. We know in Islam, even at the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, people committed crimes. People stole at the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We know the story of the woman that was from a very powerful tribe, and she didn't want to have her hand cut off when she stole. The people tried to beg on her behalf. They said, look, we don't want you to cut off the hand of this woman because she, to apply the had, the criminal punishment for that, because for theft or burglary, depending on how you translate it. Of course, we know there's many conditions for this, that it has to be a certain minimum amount for this to actually happen. It's done by the government in an Islamic state. It's not any random Joe Schmo goes and does this. But this tribe, the leaders of the tribe, didn't want this punishment to be applied to her, so what did they do? They came, one of them, and wanted to beg on her behalf to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, saying, "Oh Muhammad ﷺ, don't do this, don't apply the punishment on her, because she's from the wealthy, noble people, from our people, and this will make us look bad, etc." And this is when, as we know, the famous incident when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ showed us the example of adl and justice in Islam, that he got up on the minbar. He got up on the minbar right then and there after this incident and said, by Allah Azza wa Jal, by Allah, that if Fatima bint Muhammad, if Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad ﷺ, were to steal, to commit this type of burglary or theft or what have you, then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that he would have applied that punishment himself, the criminal punishment for the theft or the burglary. So showing that, and he also warned the people after that, saying that this is exactly how many of the nations before you were destroyed. When someone of their powerful people or people in power did a crime that had a certain punishment or what have you, but they were from the wealthy people or the elite, they didn't apply the punishment to them. They let them go. This is called corruption, of course, and bribery. And when one of the regular people did this, one of the poor people or laymen did this, then they would apply the punishment. So this is one of the reasons for being humiliated as an ummah, when we do this type of inequality and discrimination based on people's social status, etc. So, to get back to our point here, that this is also would be refuting the people that say that Islam is promoting a utopian or unrealistic way of life, and of course, as we said, that Islam is a very practical way of life, even just in the definition of worship, that worship is anything that is done sincerely for the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal, according to the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. It's not the traditional form of worship of many people that think that just praying and fasting and that's it. And we'll get to an example of that in a second here. So, this is just a recap to bring us into this week's continuation of this topic. And showing the connection between acquiring taqwa, which has been a topic many times prior to this, and just making an extra connection to knowledge and the importance of seeking knowledge in this taqwa. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says in Surah Al-Baqarah, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الحج أشهر معلومات فمن فرض فيهن الحج فلا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج وما تفعلوا من خير يعلمه الله وتزودوا فإن خير الزاد التقوى واتقون يا أولي الألباب. Or roughly translated meaning, and whatever good you do, I'm only translating the last part that's relevant to the topic here, whatever good you do, be sure Allah knows it. And take a provision with you for the journey. And subhanAllah, the provision here, the word provision here, is used not in the normal sense of what you think of